fellow makers. I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about how I made this card for the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous 2022 release. This card features the really fun background stamp Bubbles, CMS 449, and the sentiment is from Noteworthy, CMS 446. I used my favorite technique, the iron-off technique, so you will need some clear embossing ink and clear embossing powder. I also used an older stamp set from Tim that I'll talk about a little bit later when I'm doing my demo. And then you'll need some watercolor paper, distress inks, and I used my blending brushes for this card. So those are the things that you're going to need. And let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you how I made this card. To make the ocean for the Collect Beautiful Moments card, you're going to take the Bubbles stamp and attach it to a stamping block. You need some distress embossing ink. You need some clear embossing powder. And I also have my distress watercolor cardstock. I buy it in a 5.5 or 8.5 by 11, and I cut it into 5.5 by 4.25 sheets. That's the size that we're going to be using now. I'm going to put it on my media grip. I'm going to ink up and I'm going to be stamping on the smooth side. If you'll remember, there is a rough side, if you can see that, and a smooth side. I'm going with the smooth side. You really want to ink up your Bubbles stamp and get all those little bits and pieces covered. You can also, this does fit on the large stamping platform, which is generally what I use, but for those who don't have it, this will work just fine. Okay. Then I'm going to make sure that I leave enough room for the sentiment and the little crabs that are coming through. So I'm going to lay it down and give it nice firm pressing. And when I did this, because you really can't be absolutely positive that you're going to like the first one. So because I had everything out, I did multiples at once, and then I picked the one that I liked the best. So now I'm going to take and try and keep from getting this all over everything, but I'm going to put my embossing powder on the ocean portion. Tapping just a little. Okay. And there you can see I have my embossing powder on there, and now I'm going to heat emboss it just on the plain white paper. There's no color or anything, just going to heat emboss this now. As I said, it's oftentimes good to make multiples just in case you mess up. Or think you messed up. Oftentimes our mess ups end up being our best cards, right? But now that you have this, I have it heat embossed. You can see they're all kind of shiny with the ocean part. And now I want to pick my sentiment. So I might want one that says "Make Today Amazing." And I can stamp it on there. And I'm going to do the same thing. It might be Own Your Dreams, Be Fearless, any of those. And I picked Collect Beautiful Moments. So I'm going to pick that for one of them. And then, what do you think? What should we do? Maybe Be Fearless. Let's do that one. Okay, so I'm going to stamp those on these three, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stamp them in embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss them with clear embossing powder. That's all this is. This is not white. Again, it is clear embossing powder on watercolor cardstock. I'll be back as soon as I get these sentiments stamped and inked. Okay, I'm back. I thought you might want to know a couple of things as I do this. So you are going to want to know that when I put it on, I lined it up with the grids on my stamping block. And then I also want to take into consideration that I will be trimming around the edge just a little bit, and I'm going to have, you know, those crabs or whatever you choose to put it coming in just a bit. So as I do this, I'm going to make sure I get that on there. I'm going to put it kind of in, so I'm going to say about a ½ inch both ways, and that way I'm absolutely positive I won't get any of it, so that it gets cut off. Okay. All right, and let's put that clear embossing powder on there. Okay, make today amazing. I'm going to heat emboss that, and then I'm going to do the same thing to the other two. My pieces are all stamped. They all have the embossing powder has been heat embossed already, so it is going to act as a natural resist. So now I am going to use my blending brushes, and I've already pulled out a brown blending brush and my blue blending brush, and I'm going to be using the following colors to make my ocean: Salty Ocean and Tumbled Glass. And then for the sand, I'm going to try Brushed Corduroy, Gathered Twigs, and Ground Espresso. Now you may be thinking, wow, those last two are really dark. The Brushed Corduroy may be a little too dark too. So we will see how it goes. And what I'm thinking, this is why you do more than one, because you may decide, you know what, I think I want a lighter sand, and then you pick different colors. So let's go ahead and get this started. I'm gonna just pick one and put it out here, and I'm starting with my Salty Ocean and Tumbled Glass. So I want the Salty Ocean to be kind of in this corner, and I love the way it just goes on so lightly. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on there, and darker in the corner, because it's as if the water's coming in this way. So I do want darker in the corner around that little hidden Mickey. My friend asked me, did I see the hidden Mickey? And I said yes, and then Tim pointed it out. So I'm going to go all the way up into here with this. And I did 3 or 4 of these the first time because I just kind of wanted to get the feeling just right. Because this is not going to be just all blue and all sand. You're going to have some sand that's going to blend in back here. So you kind of want to go all the way to that edge. All right, now I'm going to add some of my brown in. So I'm going to start with the Brushed Corduroy and start from the edges and work my way in. And that's where, like I was saying, especially along this line here, I want to make sure that I'm in there so you can see, especially along this line here, you're going to have some of that sand show through. All right, and then this just took me a while to kind of try and get the sand the way I wanted it to look and as dark as I wanted it to be. And of course it was a little darker on the edges than it was on some of the other areas. But this brush actually really gave it, you can already see it's giving it a lot of texture. so we're getting there. I'm going to add a little bit of gathered twigs. I might go in with vintage photo, might be where I want to head, but the gathered twigs will start getting me there. Because I want it a little darker, especially around those words. You really want those to stand out, so it is going to have to be a little bit darker brown over there. Okay, now I wanted to make it look like sand, so that's where, whoops, my ground espresso comes in. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push this up a little bit because I want these to be stiffer. And I'm going to get some ground espresso on here, and then I'm going to start doing this. To give some texture of the sand. All right, so there's one. Now that's not where we stop, but there is one. So we'll give this one a try. Next, you need to have your sprayer ready, and you're going to wet this. So you're going to spritz it, and that's going to add even more texture. Okay, now you are not going to dry this with a heat tool. You are going to let it sit aside and dry on its own. For this one, this is Collect Beautiful Moments, I'm going to add a little Mermaid Lagoon, and let's see what that does. All right, when you wipe it off before you add the water, you can kind of see close to what it's going to look like, and I kind of like the mixture here. I feel like I want it to have a little more, I think, vintage photo feel. You could, if you wanted, at this point, go in with a blending tool and just add some here and there. And that would be fine, especially over those words if you wanted. But you can see when I do that, that does take away some of the texture, but you're going to get that back. We have a couple more steps we're going to do. So you will get that back. We'll go ahead and wipe that off. And you can kind of get a hint of where we're headed with this. Let's go ahead and sprinkle this with water. Okay, and you want to get a nice amount of water on there because you do want it to kind of pool around some of where that embossing powder is. Again, we're laying it to the side to dry. For the Be Fearless card, I thought it would be fun to try and make the sand a little more yellow and see how that works. I don't know how it will work if the Be Fearless will stand out, but I'm going to try and be fearless and just give it a shot. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with the blue again, like we did before, starting with that lighter blue along the shoreline. All right, that's good for our blue. Now let's get our yellow started. So I'm going to start with scattered straw, and then we'll add some fossilized amber. And just see where this goes. So it has a little less brown, a little more yellow feel to the sand on that one. I'm going to again wipe off so that I can see. So I will be able to see the Fearless, and my ocean's still going to be nice and foamy. So we'll go ahead and add our water. Set that aside to dry. While we're waiting for our backgrounds to dry naturally, I want to do one of my little kind of additions or focals. Now you could use anything on this set. This is Sea Life CMS 304. And you could, you know, use, like I said, any parts of some of these. But for me and the size of the card, if I pull this in, I felt like that, you know, kind of having a little bit of a crab peeking in here and maybe up here was pretty much enough for this to give it that sea life feel. But, you know, you could add any of these in, you know, anywhere that you might want, if that was your desire. So I took the crab from the Sea Life. Let's let that keep drying. I stamped 2 of them. So let me get him on. Actually, I'm going to put him in the center here. Okay. And I'm going to stamp him in archival. I stamped him in a little bit of, I did a mixture here because I wanted the outside to be colored, but I didn't want him to be too dark and unnatural looking. So I started with Crackling Campfire and I inked him all up. And again, because I have several stamp platforms, because you know me, I always have to buy things when I know they're going away. So I did this on a stamp platform so that I was sure that I had him looking the way I wanted it. But I'm just tapping in a little bit of, you could use either Vintage Photo or you could use Ground Espresso to add a little bit of definition to some of those appendages. And then I'm going to make sure that I get it nice and a contact there. All right, and see, this is why I like to use a stamping platform, because I would go back in and actually kind of make him a little darker in a couple of areas, but that's okay. We are going to watercolor him, and I have found that on watercolor paper with archival that it doesn't completely resist. It actually, a lot of times it will soak in the colors of the distress inks, which I really find fascinating that it does that. So let's go ahead and do our next one. So, whoops, inking him up again with Crackling Campfire, and then adding in a little interest on the ends here, and where his legs meet the shell, the back of the shell, again on the outside edges here, and then on the outside edges of the pinchers, his little nose, and then that should give him some definition, and then down the center a little bit. Okay. Now, if I really planned it, I probably would only have to do this once, and depending on the color you might want, you could actually, instead of stamping it and coloring it and fussy cutting it, if you wanted to be fearless, and this isn't quite dry yet, but I might be able to do that. If you wanted to be fearless, you could probably stamp this and color it on there. So let's do that on the Be Fearless one, okay? Let's just give it a shot. So I'm going to do some of this. a little ground espresso. And then what I think I'm going to do, since I'm stamping right on there, is I think I might add some vintage photo to this one. I think that might help out a little. So I have that base of the Crackling Campfire, and then I added some vintage photo. So let's see how that looks. Again, oh, I did the wrong side of him, so let me go ahead and put this one in here, because that's the side I did. All right, let's be fearless. We might like this better than the fussy heading. All right, I've got that going. And now let's do this other side. I don't know what I was thinking. So let me wipe it off and start over. I'll just do the whole little guy. Add some of that vintage photo. And ground espresso on his little appendages, where his arms meet the shell, down the center, and again on the outside edges. All right, and being fearless, let's put him or her right there. I don't know anything about crabs. I have no idea how you tell the difference if it's a him or a her. So we have one him and one her. There we go. Okay, so we tried that. And I will be back as soon as the rest of these are completely dry to show you what we do with making the foam white and not shiny. Now I want to color these. I'm just going to use my watercolor water brush, and I'm using Barn Door, Crackling Campfire, Ripe Persimmon, and Vintage Photo. All right, before I iron off the embossing powder, I want to make some of the little texture. So I'm taking one of my dark brown and I'm pushing this up a little bit, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to just pounce this to try and give a little bit of texture throughout. You know how sand sometimes has little bits of dark and then the other. So that's my purpose in doing that. I'm going to set this aside to dry for a second, and then I'm going to wipe it off of the embossing powder before I iron it. So let me do that on here as well. This one's a little darker. And really, you only see this if you're up close. So if you skip this step, it's really not going to make that much of a difference. But I just thought that it was kind of a fun addition. It's really going to probably show up on this one because it is so light. I actually really think I like the stamped little crabs as opposed to fussy cutting them, because that is a lot of work. Okay. So here you can see before I fussy cut them, and really fussy cutting them makes a huge difference, but this just was so much faster and easier than when I fussy cut them for my original card. So I think that is a change that I would make if I made this, you know, again, which I just did. So that's the way that I would go. So I'm going to take a dry cloth very quickly, and off to the side here, you can't see it, but I have an iron heating up. I might just dampen that a little bit. Just the tiniest bit. So I can kind of get that off there a little bit. Don't want too much. You also are going to want to have, at this point, some scrap paper available, just plain white typing paper or plain white cardstock or something like that available at this point. Okay. And I take one of my Inky Binkies, and I don't throw them away. I just wash them until they get too much stuff on them. So take a towel on your work surface, and then you're going to place it embossing ink side up. You're just going to take your scrap paper here, lay it on there, take a hot iron, and you're going to iron over it. This is the iron off part of the resist. And then you can lift it up and see how it's going. And so you can see it is remelting that embossing powder, and it's taking it off, which I absolutely love. So I'm going to actually take another clean one here and keep embossing that clear embossing. Remember, this was clear. It is not colored. This will work as I've shown before, and I may have to link all of those in my blog post, but this works really well with background stamps and the distress embossing glaze, because it leaves behind a little bit of color from the glaze, and I really love that. So I did that for Halloween one year with quite a lot, and I also just did it with the release of the new archival colors and the new glaze colors this spring. All right, so not much more came off, but you can see it is not shiny now, and it resisted the ink, so it is a flat, but like a faux batik, which is what I absolutely love about it, because I don't like the shiny on the cards, and so I love how it's just a flat resist, and I just think that's just so beautiful. So let's do another one. Let's do the Collect Beautiful Moments. It is much darker in color than this one's, kind of the medium one. So let's try this one. And then we'll end with the Be Fearless. All right. This is, I'm telling you, this is the most addictive technique to me, and I just can't stop. And that's why I used it on most of my makes. There we go. And there you go. Another one with that beautiful, and I just love the way when you spray the water on there and it just kind of models up. So it looks like, you know, there's some where there's more sand showing through and some where there's more water with the sea foam. I just love that effect. All right, so let's do our Be Fearless. So there you go, Be Fearless. And we have 3 backgrounds. One that's pretty much ready to go. In order to finish this card, all you would have to do is to do a little bit of trimming to fit it on your background card. And then I always sew around mine a little bit. You don't have to. But you have your sentiment, you have everything there all ready to go. For these, you would need to fussy cut and then adhere. I adhered the little bits of the crabs to the card before I sewed it. So you'll want to be sure that you do that. Or if you just want maybe just a, you know, maybe you have some seashells or something like that that you want to add. Hey makers, I'm popping in with an addendum to this tutorial because I just could not let this amazing color Uncharted Mariner go without giving it a try on this card. So I made the card long before this color was released, and to my surprise, when I saw it, I immediately was like, you know I already have the tutorial filmed, but I can't edit it until I make a card with this amazing new color, Uncharted Mariner. It's just perfect. So I wanted to make this little addendum. I'm going to use the exact same technique that I have made with the other colors. The only difference is that for the water, I am going to use the Uncharted Mariner by itself. I'm not using any other blues. I'm going to continue to use the Scattered Straw for kind of a lighter sand color, and then bring in some of the deeper tones with frayed burlap this time. It has a little bit of a green undertone, and I thought it would go better than some of the other more yellow orangey sand colors that I used on the other cards. So these are the 3 that I am using, and let's just go ahead and give it a shot and see how it turns out. Starting off with the smooth side of my watercolor paper, I have the bubble stamp, my embossing ink, clear embossing ink, and so I'm going to just ink this up very quickly. I'm going to try and do this as fast as I can and in one really quick. I know I'm going to have to edit this together, but we'll try and do it as quickly as possible. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and stamp that, again leaving room for the crabs and leaving room for our sentiment. And I am using this stamping tool that my dad made me, and I often get some questions about it, and it's just a block of wood with an antique door handle that he attached, and then he put some felt on the bottom for me. Okay, now let's bring in the clear embossing powder. See how I did. I think I got everything. Let's make sure up here, just in case I miss some of those little splashes. I want to get them all in. All right, and now I am going to heat emboss this off camera. That looks pretty good. Hopefully you can see all the shininess. Now, I don't want the shininess on my final card, but I need it because that's what's causing the resist to the white paper. Now I want a sentiment, so I am going to use Full of Wonder. So let me pull that off, and I'll use the same stamping block. Okay, let's ink that up with our clear embossing ink. And then See if we can make sure we get that straight. I want it out more. This is completely embossed with the sentiment. Now I am going in, I'm going to start off with the sand as I did with the other one. So I'm starting off with scattered straw. So let's get that onto our, and I'm using distress brushes for this because I just want a light blend. So I'm going along the foam and then I'm going to go out into the corner. And you can just do this quickly. You know how sometimes sand has deep areas and then those little lighter areas. So it's all fine. We're going to spray this anyway. All right, and so then where the foam is, I'm going to go ahead and go in a little bit more. Great. Now I want to add a little bit of brown. So I'm going in with my frayed burlap and I'm going in with a regular brush around the edges and in that corner where my sentiment is. I'm just going to lightly go over the whole thing because these brushes give it texture. And I kind of like that because it's not really completely smooth. And that's really what I want. All right. Later on, we're going to come back in and we're going to do the thing where we push the brush, whatever this is, guard up so that we can do the speckles in a darker color to make it really look like sand. But I think that's pretty good. Need a little bit more around Full of Wonder, but that should be good. I don't want to get it too dark. Now the frayed burlap, like I said, is going to add a little bit of green because this Uncharted Mariner kind of feels like it has a bit of a green kind of undertone in there. All right, so now we're going to start with Uncharted Mariner in the corner. And then I'm just going to go out from there. Up into the foam area, and you can move the guard up a little if you want, and then I'm not pushing as hard, but I kind of want to get up around these areas here without going too much into the sand with the blue, if that makes any sense. Because I want some of these over here to stay white, like they're just foam that's splashing up onto the beach without a lot of water behind it. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now, we want to wipe off the ink that is on the surface of the embossing. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe some of that off. And that kind of helps us see. Looks to me like, I mean, Full of Wonder stands out. I think I want to add maybe, where'd my yellow brush go? A little bit more yellow, maybe in that corner. A little bit more of that scattered straw. Make sure our sentiment stands out. go just a little bit in here with some of the yellow. Maybe kind of like it. So you can see that. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and stop there. Again, I'm wiping that off of the embossing. There. And I really like the way that looks. Okay. So I like the deeper Uncharted Mariner down here, a little bit deeper sand color up here. And now I am going to stay back. I want to try and avoid the big spray that comes from the spray nozzle. So I'm going to stay back as far as I can and just kind of do a bunch of little sprays. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. And I think I'll just give a good one to the water here in the corner. And I'm just going to let that sit. Remember, we are not heat drying it. We are letting it dry naturally. And then we'll come back and we'll do the crabs in the corners. And then we'll do the iron off resist. The piece has dried naturally. And if you want to take a close look at that, you can see how wonderful. We have some deep tones from Uncharted Mariner, and then it just blends out into just some nice, very light sea color as it moves onto the shoreline with the foam kind of splashing up and over the sand. Now I need to add in the two little crabs, and remember those are from Sea Life CMS 304. And I am sticking with the crabs. You could probably, you know, I mean, you could probably do a lobster, you know, if you wanted. Could be kind of interesting. Or a fish. But for me, I just feel like the little crab is going to do the best. And since I have the deep blue here, I think I'll stick with kind of a marine, and I'm going to use barn door with a little vintage photo and ground espresso as I put these on there. So I want this crab to be coming in this way towards Full of Wonder, and I have not ironed this off yet, so it is still resisting. And so some of this will probably not completely show up if I put that clear down there. So I may move it up a little closer to the words, but it will make kind of a nice resist so that it will still seem like the spray is going over the little crab, which is kind of a fun thing. And then this one, because this one's facing this way, I kind of think I want this one to be going in a completely different direction and just poking in on the side there. I don't want too much over here. So I think that's where we're going to go with this. All right, I have the crab on a stamping block. I'm going to start off with the Barn Door red archival ink. And I'm going to get that all over. And then, if you remember from before, I like to add a little bit of down the center where the legs meet. And then over on those pinchers on the legs, on the outside, on the back end. Then those legs on the outside, and then try and get just the corner over there where the front is, and that should do pretty well. And then should still leave us just a little bit, and then just to add a little bit more definition, I'm going to go on the very outside bits with some of that ground espresso just to do the little bit of detail. I want to try and get the detail on that pincher to show up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, let's see. I think right about there. All right, let's hope for the best with that. Okay, not too bad. Then I'll watercolor that, but it does show some definition. All right, and then we're gonna do this one. So let's get back in there with our barn door. Vintage photo. Then on those tips of the feet. Back end. And this one I'm going to do a little bit darker. Okay. And let's add those few touches of the ground espresso. And this one we were going to have just peeking in over here. I have the crabs stamped in archival. Now I'm going to just watercolor with my watercolor brush, my water brush. I'm using Barn Door Distress Ink, Fired Brick Distress Ink, and Vintage Photo. And we'll see how that looks. I'm just going to squish some out over on my nonstick craft mat, and then I will just be going into the ink and picking it up and watercoloring with it. Moving on to the next step, now that the crabs are watercolored, I'm going to take my brown distress blending brush, and I'm going to push this guard up so that it's really kind of spiky and pokey. Then before I actually push it up, I want to get it nice and wet. And then I'm going to go ahead and push it up. And I'm just going to kind of lightly pounce it all over the sand area. And it's okay if you go right over those little crabs, that won't matter. And this is supposed to give it just a little bit of the speckledy sand look that I hope you'll be able to see. And I'm going clear up to the shoreline with it. And if you look closely, you can see the little specks to kind of give it a little bit of the look of sand. And the next step is that we are going to now iron off the shiny part. I don't want it to look shiny. That may be okay for you, and if it is, you can leave it as is. But for me, I wanted it to not be shiny. I wanted it to kind of have that batik or faux batik look. So I'm going to go ahead and iron it, and I'll show you how to do that once the iron's hot. All right, makers, so I have just one of my old Inky Pinkies. I folded it up several times. It's clean. I just need it as kind of a pad to iron on. I have the completed card front, and then I just cut some, this is just cheap cardstock that you run through like a printer, a laser printer, a inkjet or something like that. That's all that this is. It's a little thicker than regular typing paper. And I am going to lay it directly on top of my other piece. I have my heated iron, and then all you do is just iron over it. And this is reheating all of that embossing ink and causing it to soak right back into the paper on top. Now you can actually, if it was just the bubbles, we could make a second print from this that would also resist. So this would also resist. It would have kind of an interesting look to it because sometimes it will pull in some of the ink like it has here. But I think that sometimes that's really interesting. So if I'm going to do that, I would use another piece of watercolor paper. But I'm not planning on using these. So I'm just using kind of throwaway paper. Now I can still see shiny on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I get it nice and hot over on that side, because I don't want shine on mine. And again, there's nothing wrong with shine. So if that's what you're going for, you could use white embossing powder, but I wanted it flat. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me put the iron back and then see what I think. All right, there's still a little bit of shine over here, but I think I might be trimming that side off. So don't forget to fit this on a regular, I think it's A2 size card. I do need to trim 1/8 of an inch, either all the way around or 1/4 of an inch off from 2 sides in order to have a little bit of a reveal. And I'm also going to be sewing around it. But if you look, you can see now that it is no longer shiny. And it just has that really cool batik look. And this is nice and white because it resisted everything. You can see the little speckles of sand in the corner. And then just kind of that blue, that amazing Uncharted Mariner with some of the deep marine color. And then as it lightens, as it gets toward the shore. I really love this color combination. And then the red crabs just kind of give you that whole maritime feel. To trim this, I am going to use the decal trimmer. So I'm going to line it up. And I'm going to go in just about 1/8 of an inch. Trim. Go in 1/8 of an inch. That's not quite. There we go. Trim. And then this one is at 4. And this one is at 5 1/4. There you go. So you have kind of a rough edge all the way around, kind of in keeping with that theme that I was going for. And then you can kind of see what it looks like if you mat it on white. I made 3 with the Uncharted Mariner color scheme. And so they're all just slightly different. So this one's a little bit lighter all the way through in tone. This one seems to be a little greener all the way through in tone, but you're still getting a few bits of the darker Uncharted Mariner. And then this is the one that has the nice dark all the way up until it starts to kind of fade off into the water. So it just kind of goes to show you how different the same distress inks can look with the same technique and the whole thing, just depending on how lightly you press or how much ink that you use. So I love this Uncharted Mariner for this technique. I just think it looks so great. So I hope that it was worth it to wait for me to get Uncharted Mariner so that I could try it out with this card. All right, so that's all there is to this fairly simple card. I hope that you are inspired nonetheless. And I want to thank you again very much for stopping by my channel. I really appreciate all the support that you give me just by coming and watching my demos. It really encourages me. Also, if there's something that I didn't cover in this tutorial and you would like some clarification, please go to my blog at playswellwithpaper.blogspot.com, and there is a contact section in the right hand column. I will be glad to try and clarify or answer any questions that you might have. And other than that, thank you so much again for stopping by, and I hope that you have a very crafty day.